something. Welcome everyone to another Health for Busy Entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Julian Hayes II, back at it again with another fascinating human, a fascinating woman, talking about a subject that I love, which is travel. And I don't want to spoil everything so we can hear her, but just to give you a teaser of who she is, she traveled to 84 countries by the time she was 31. She's a wellness travel coach. She's the founder of Sahara Rose Travels and the founder of also of the Travel Coach Network, which is the she's the creator, sorry, of the world's first certification program for travel. Lastly, she's an author. And so that is just a little bit. She has a lot more to her, but I don't want to say too much. So without further ado, Sahara Rose De Vore, how's it going?
Hi, Julian. Thank you for having me. I'm doing well. I'm excited to chat with you today.
Yeah, me too. I haven't had anyone on here specifically in the to talk about travel and specifically what you're doing. I think the closest I had was someone who runs kind of like a luxury travel service where they place in a certain region, but
Okay.
nothing like you're doing. Um, so before we start, I always like to go back in the past before we stay in the present and look to the future. So I want to know,
hmm
as I was researching you a little bit, we share a similarity that we're only childs. And
Yes.
so I'm curious to know what have you learned from being an only child that has made you into who you are today?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Yeah, I'm an only child to a single mom, and um, it's just really, it's hard to explain because I've always gone against the grain of what is expected in a situation or a person. Sometimes you hear like, and is very, like to stay in their comfort zones or they are all about themselves. Uh, and I've always gone against the grain and done the opposite of what's expected. So, being an only child, I've learned to be super independent, obviously, especially with a hardworking mom who was single for the majority of my life. That it was, and not that I had to necessarily look after myself, but I always wanted to make sure, like, I was okay to make sure my mom knew I was okay. So, just having that independence really into who I am today and the journey I've gone on, and being a dual entrepreneur well, being a problem solver and just having the kind of the motto to always just figure things out is
Hmm.
something I've always just said throughout my years of traveling and business is that I'll figure it out. Like you don't have the answers right now, don't have full clarity, but I'll figure it out. So just being an only child, I just learned to really identify who I am and spend more time and know that it's okay to be alone. And so I let that hinder me, especially as a traveler. Many people are fearful of traveling alone or solo, or especially women. I've been so comfortable with being alone that I never had to wait or never allowed myself to wait for any give me guidance or support or encouragement or to be there with me through anything in my life, and that rolls over into entrepreneurship as well.
Yeah, I totally relate to all of that. Especially, oh well, one I always got is that you just care nothing about yourself. That's the one I got a lot. But you know, I share that similarity as well. You know, I think about the first trip I did, and I went to London, I went to Portugal, and it was just by myself. And I had a bunch of friends who were saying, you know, aren't you worried about the language barrier or just being out there by yourself? How are you going to make friends and everything? And I said, pretty much, growing up as an only child, I like my own company. I've had plenty of time to practice at it. And also, like you said, I'll figure it out. And I think as an only child, you realize that if you do want to talk to people, you're going to have to just go out in the world because you didn't have that comfort zone of just having people around you to rely upon for entertainment as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think many people depend too much on others, and that rolls over into all aspects of your life, whether it's your living situation, relationships, friendships, and even business. Sometimes heard many people who are thinking about starting a business say, "Oh, but I don't have anyone to do it with." And in my head, I'm like, "Why? Why are you waiting?"
Hmm.
So I think having that independence and that confidence in your own capabilities, and that's something that being an only child and a world traveler has taught me, is that I know my strengths, I know my weaknesses, but I will be able to, whatever goals I set for myself, I would be able to do on my own. Of course, there's always like mentorship and everything like that, but like just have and do it.
So, do you remember your first international trip?
Oh, do I? Yeah. So my first trip ever actually, or solo, was to Ireland. And I just posted this in a Facebook group, did a post about it, and someone asked me like, why Ireland? Which is a great question. So if anyone here is wondering that as well, I don't really know, except for I think it was just because it was I just graduated university. I was 22, and listening to what society or anyone wanted, and I skipped the corporate route. I bought a one-way ticket and I packed a bag and I set off to go travel. But I chose Ireland because I was doing Western Europe for the first time, or was my region to, and I wanted to start further out and then move my way inward. And also, there was a family friend who lived there, so it was a good beginning ground for myself as a solo traveler for the first time backpacking to like stay with. I didn't know the person, but they were family friends, so just a week with them in Ireland, and then I went for my on my own.
Yeah. So, do you have? This is probably a tough question, especially with as many countries as you've been to. But do you have maybe like your top five that are near and dear to you?
Yeah, that's one of the most common questions that I have, and you think I'd be a little bit more prepared for that, but it's so hard to choose because it's like everywhere is so different in the world, and what makes someone really love a destination or a country changes upon the destination. So whether it's people or the food or culture or just a specific experience someone has really ingrains whether they love the place or not. But some of my favorite places I always just say are I love Thailand. And I know that as a backpacking standpoint, that's pretty generic, but it really is such a diverse with so many things for avid travelers and novice travelers to do. The Philippines is a place that I hold near to my heart because the people are absolutely amazing, and it's very underrated there, and the beaches are just stunning. Ireland, or I went to Tel Aviv, Israel, a few years back, and absolutely loved Tel Aviv. I didn't. I would say I love more of Israel, but I love Tel Aviv so much that I didn't really leave the city as much as I wanted to. So it's a mission to go back and see more of the country because it's really amazing. South Africa and Cape Town was stunning. I was very surprised at how actually affordable, like lobster and wine and food is there, and the scenery is just stunning. And then I'm originally from Mexico, or I'm not from Mexico, from Mexico. So Mexico is a place that has a really big stamp on my heart. It's so easy to go there, and I was actually just there a couple months ago just to live and work for a couple weeks. And it's so affordable, the culture, the food, everything, and the weather, of course.
Yeah, so I can imagine as you were traveling all these different countries, that at some point you're thinking in your head, like, I don't want this to stop. I don't I probably cannot just do the traditional job route. I got to figure out a way to make this happening. So was that, I'm just guessing, was that kind of the impetus for starting and to figure out a way to make this travel coaching a career?
Well, as for just traveling, able to afford and have the lifestyle that I did for so long before I even started. I traveled for a decade before even starting my businesses about 3.5, 4 years ago. And referring to like just that journey itself of traveling the world, which is obviously a very common question people ask me is how did you afford it? How did you do that? Didn't you run, you must have run out of money and come back home and made more money. Um, no, I did not run out. Yes, I did. So that's another misconception people obviously have of me, and they're like, "Oh, who's paying for this? Your parents?" I'm like, "No, not at all." I lived in Chicago my last 2 years of university, and Chicago is a very diverse city with different jobs. So I pulled my butt off and worked up to 5 jobs while I was finishing my last years of university. And because I was working, I didn't have time to spend the money and to go out and party or anything like my friends were doing. So I saved. I was able to save a lot of money, and I also changed how I viewed only child, a single mom. Money was not abundant, so I was always very like, I knew how to manage my money, but then I had to take a look at my expenses. Where can I also eliminate? And it's that's and many people say, what do you have to sacrifice in order to have that travel lifestyle? And I don't view it that way at all. If anything, I'm passionate about, whether my business or my travels or anything. I don't say I have to sacrifice anything. I'm making choices going to get me one step closer to my goal. So I would eliminate like my cable bill, so I didn't have a TV. And this is before like all the streaming nowadays. So more people watch stuff off of their laptops anyways. But back then I was just on different websites that I could watch shows, or just didn't have a TV. So I looked at what expenses I did have, like my gym membership, and I just canceled those and found other ways around to, work out or watch TV or whatever it was I wanted to do. And I was able just to save enough money. And then I always set a limit in my head and my budget that when I reached a certain amount, I would figure things out. I actually never worked while traveling. Many people have and can, especially nowadays. There's so much that you can do on the computer. But then I would just figure things out. I'd come back to either get another job. I would find another, come back home to Milwaukee and find another flexible job. I built a lot of great relationships with my previous employers at the time, so they kind of knew. And I also chose very flexible or seasonal jobs that they kind of knew that I was going to kind of hop in and out. Or I worked in restaurants where I was, seasonal or something. I got to make it happen.
So this is basically giving you all the ingredients you needed to become a successful entrepreneur. And if you think about it, building relationships, not burning bridges, being flexible, being adaptable, and also being very intentional. Mm-hmm. So do you think that travel has made you a much more successful entrepreneur in terms of being able to handle the uncertainty that comes with it?
I always say that travel was my greatest professor. No discredit to any of my professors in my universities. They were amazing. But until you go out and about in the world or have hands-on experience in no matter what industry, you learn things in a whole different way than do you learn behind a computer or in a classroom. And I think many people can relate to that. Many entrepreneurs who realized and created what they created because of something they went through in their life or learned about. So yes, travel, it faces you with a lot of decision making, unexpected problems, budget management, mindset and self-confidence, strategy on how to, whether it's safety, maintaining your budget, navigation. There's so many relate to becoming an entrepreneur. And of course, travel was the catalyst to how I created both of them and why I created both of my businesses now, because it exposed me to a whole new world of people and problems and voids and shortages that I would not have otherwise realized or heard or talked to. So that is what inspired me to become a travel coach and then also start the Travel Coach Network.
Mm-hmm. Let's start with the first business where you become a travel coach. So what's the origin of that?
Yeah, so what do I say? So I was never someone who knew exactly what I wanted to do in my life with career. And that was something I often was hard on myself for, because all other areas of my life, I figure things out. Like I'm clear, I have a goal, I can make it happen. I have tons of experience. I have passions and interests, but I never could figure out what my career path was. And I think now, and I actually never this like this before, but I think there was a purpose, or I know there was a purpose for my lack of clarity for so long, because had I had some idea back then, maybe back then meaning, through high school, going into knowing what to study in college, graduating college, knowing what business to work for, company or whatnot, I never knew. But I have created two new niches, or paved paths into new niches, had I made a decision years ago on something else. But I never knew exactly what I wanted to take. And I used travel as a way to kind of show me that and open the doors to different ideas and opportunities. So but I still struggled for a long time. I have a degree in hospital management when I graduated. I was very uncertain, and I was underwhelmed with the lack of career options in the travel and hospitality industry. So that's why I started traveling, to figure out life and myself. But I always say I traveled during really prime time in the travel industry and in just the world. With the rise in social media and the internet came everything from blogging to influencers to Instagram and Facebook, and I got to see various aspects of how that shaped the tourism industry. I started traveling with a flip phone and a paper map, and the phone didn't even turn on to even use it as a clock. And nowadays, there's every app and website and resource and everything under the sun to help you plan, sculpt, and navigate your experiences through travel. And so I got a very interesting perspective of the industry in that decade. And I still did not know what I wanted to do. I knew what travel agents did. I knew what the industry said was possible. I saw what others were doing. I didn't even want to be a freelancer and have this like digital nomad freedom lifestyle that everyone was talking about. I was living that. I just didn't have the clarity on what I wanted to do. So I gave myself time. I learned to be very patient and kind to myself as well, which is very important for entrepreneurship also. And I gave myself time to figure it out. And I said, by the time I'm 30, I will figure it out. So yes, there was 26. I was like, oh, I have 27. I have 3 years. So I was like, I'm just going to travel. I'm going to keep on experiencing, keep working random jobs. I will figure it out. 30 hits, and I was like, crap, I have no years left. Like, what do I do? So I was in the north of Spain, and a hostel community and opened up and Googled how to start an online business. Businesses are there online, not only just travel related, because I was well aware, but in general. This was when people were just starting to really start online businesses. So there's everything from like drop shipping and all the random stuff people do these days. So Facebook got onto me and started putting at me coaching ads, business coaching ads. And that was the very first time I realized, wow, there's a booming coaching industry. I saw life and health and wellness and business and social media coaches and all these, but I did not see travel coaches. I honestly did not even Google the word travel coach until after I registered my LLC as a travel coach. And the reason I finally did that, it felt right. It just felt like that is. So I didn't even think twice about it. I didn't see if there was anyone doing it, because again, I am someone who never needed justification from anyone else or proof of anything else in order to follow what felt right for me. And so I didn't need, has this already been done? Is it possible? Is it lucrative? I didn't care. I knew that I was going to figure it out for my own business. So when I started travel coaching business, I looked at myself and said, what do I care about most when it comes to travel? How has travel really helped me? And I went to read, just use my own anecdotal experiences and beliefs and passions. I turned to research. For the next year and a half, I dove into the wellness benefits of travel, how it helps our mental, spiritual, emotional, physiological. And throughout those studies, I was very online Facebook groups and travel groups, and I kept seeing people talking about leaving the 9 to 5. Now it's like a tagline: leave the 9 to 5, leave your corporate job to travel the world. And seeing that over and over again, or people wanting to do it, or even executives saying, I left my job and now I'm traveling the world. I was like, well, why travel? What is it about travel that people are not talking about? Why are companies not integrating this? Because as I got into this rabbit hole of research, and I never went the corporate route, so I didn't have the corporate experiences, but there's tons of research out there. So I started learning about the corporate world and how people were not using their vacation days, especially in the US, or using them properly, or maybe just working throughout their vacation. And I said, well, that's really unfortunate because there's a huge burnout epidemic in the corporate world and the business travel industry. Why are companies not valuing travel like us as the average human does? We all want, for some reason, we all turn to travel for some reason. So I started my business as a travel coach for the corporate world. So I educate on the wellness benefits of travel for everything from mostly in business travel, but because of this pandemic, so many industries are realizing the value of travel and so have reached out. So everything from meetings and events to the corporate space to corporate wellness programs and hotels, tourism boards. So it's really taken off a lot, but that's how I started my travel coaching in the corporate space.
Interesting. I'm curious, because I have my reasons what travel like means to me, and like the feeling like if I close my eyes, I can like feel everything when I finally took that first international trip, and just what I felt. But
Yeah.
most of your clients, is it burnout? Is that why they want to travel, or is it more identity? Like, what's the main reason?
Yeah, so well, for the corporate world, based on research, this is all just, there's decades and decades of research on these wellness, as well as how travel can help improve people's creativity, innovation, and even productivity through things like connecting with people, learning new skills, feeling refreshed, self-reflection. There's so many reasons why this research exists. So what I do is I don't work one-on-one with individuals. I do mostly guest speaking and some other projects, but I really about how the employees, so depending on who the audience is, so if it's corporate employees in the workplace, why they should take vacation days, how can the companies integrate and value travel in their company culture and their work policies and their travel policies, how much planning and help with planning do they get, because there's a lot of studies that showed that many reasons why corporate employees were not taking their vacation days. Everything from the company didn't encourage them, they didn't want them to talk about it, they didn't have enough time to plan, they felt pressure to not take it, they had to work during it, they felt stressed and had to pick up overtime in order to come back and afford their trip. There's so many different reasons. Companies were not seeing, many companies, there are some great companies like E&Y that really do value travel and actually like pay people and their employees to travel and say like, you must use this only for vacation days, it doesn't roll over, or you can't get funds for it or whatever. So there really are companies that do a lot of the stuff that I say, but the majority of them don't. So just really talking about the benefits, because obviously companies, the corporate world's goal is reaching the bottom line, making money. But what does it mean to make money in your business? Is making sure your employees are performing, feeling their best, especially now with the pandemic, and being the most productive. So that rolls over then into business travel. What's the point of a business trip in the first place? That's a big conversation that's being had currently, because many companies realize that they can just be effective or like have business meetings virtually. But on the flip side of that, there's many people talking about the power of human connection, that face-to-face interaction, why we started traveling and getting on a plane, going on a business trip and having in-person meetings and events in the first place. There's a huge difference on what that does for our overall well-being and our performance in our job too. So incorporating things, how can they minimize their burnout, because business by simple as taking a walk outdoors in nature, seeing what the destination has to offer, whether it's a hotel, many are offering walking programs or educational programs or cultural programs. There's a lot of networking things to get to know people if you're a solo business traveler, connect and meet someone, learn new skills, see how another country does their business deals. There's so much to go into the benefits of travel, but it has not been done effectively.
Yeah, I group this also kind of into when I think about corporate wellness, it's these things are harder for companies to look at their bottom lines because,
Yeah.
if you look at like a marketing program or a sales program, you're thinking it's harder, it's easier to see the numbers. Whereas when you're talking about travel and you're talking about overall wellness, there's a
Right.
lot more intangibles and it's harder to measure. So
Yeah.
you think is that that's probably one of your hardest points to, I guess, to make when you have this initial resistance when you're introducing something like this?
Yeah, but when you think about it, this is like, I don't like to talk positively about the about 2020 and the pandemic because it did a lot of ugliness in the world and still is, but it also shined a light on a lot of really important aspects across many industries and for us in our own personal lives and work lives that would not have come as quickly or as with as much importance had the pandemic not happened. So yes, it is very difficult to well-being or see an ROI on a travel experience, but yes, that is a conversation being had in the industry, but not there's the way that the industries have measured has been very old school. It's seeing numbers, seeing results, but there are many different types of initiatives being implemented into the corporate world for remote workers, for business travelers, from as simple as 24-hour gyms, and this was even before the pandemic, 24-hour gyms, comfier to sleep in, healthier meal options. But how do you measure that ROI? How do you know investing into that or making those choices were just as important as the mental well-being of your employees as well? There are a lot of what I noticed in the industry pre-pandemic was that there was not really anyone taking responsibility of the well-being of the employee or the business traveler. And what I mean by that is, especially in the business travel industry, who's responsible? Is it the business? Is it the travel manager? Is it the HR? Who's responsible for the overall well-being of your business traveler? And I'm not talking about risk management or duty of care. Yes, this integrates now. I'm a member of the Global Business Travel Association's Risk Management Committee, so this is conversations we're having in that too. But there was a huge separation between wellness and well-being and caring about the safety and concern of your employees. But why is mental well-being not as important as someone's physical well-being when it comes like earthquakes or natural disasters while on a trip? Why is their mental well-being not as important of that as also in the workplace? People care about their wellness, their well-being in the workplace, especially after, if there's something dangerous happens or anything happens in the workplace physically. But what about the wellness, the well-being aspect? And that is something I found really interesting that companies were not paying attention to. Is who in their right mind can be productive, care about what they're doing, okay, and be happy if they're not okay mentally, if they're not feeling supported or cared about or acknowledged. And that's something you'll hear a lot of people a job that they have is they didn't feel like their employer, their manager cared about them. And we think of like people a job because of the overall company. No, people leave a job because of their management, of their leaders above them. They don't feel like they're human beings being respected or cared about, that they have a personal life, that they have mental health issues. That's what we care about now. We have more options than ever before to choose a job or a company or work remotely or start our own job than ever before. So companies better wake up and pay attention to that, because if they want to attract and retain valuable talent and have them be productive, these are new things for them to think about. So that starts with recalculating your ROI on the well-being of their employees.
Yeah, I think I saw a hashtag one day on LinkedIn or something. It said like the Great Resignation or something like that. That there's a lot of people that are not going back to their jobs, and it's for a lot of those reasons that you mentioned. So,
Yeah.
what do you think travel looks like in this post pandemic world? What do you think?
That's always hard to, there's two different ways to approach that. The what people's minds originally go to is the actual logistics of it. There's still uncertainty on borders and stuff that has to do with the vaccine and COVID and whatnot. That's not what I talk about, and that's not what I'm ever interested in. But there's that reality of the situation. But overall picture of travel now and moving forward is actually a positive one. And I say that because, like I pandemic has shined a light on a lot of really important aspects of many things in our life, whether it's our wellness, our what we're doing with our work life, our families, relationships, whatnot. It also humans have that travel has on us, and so that's why people traveling now, and it's maybe, and it doesn't have to be abroad. Travel does not have to be getting on a plane and going far. It could be as little. Airbnbs are on the rise like crazy, and they have been all through the pandemic. Solo adventures, family pods, local domestic travel. People are realizing how beneficial travel, being outdoors, and having this change of scenery is doing on our overall well-being and our mental health. Because let's take it, 2020 was a nuts of a year that really put a damper on a lot in so many different ways: financially, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, everything, physically. Travel, not that it's the answer or the cure for anything, but we have always turned to travel as humans for healing purposes or reasons, to get creative, get inspired, to connect with people, to learn, whatever. So that is what we're seeing in the tourism industry. I did a collaboration with the Health Tourism Worldwide organization. I focused on the business travel aspect, but they came out with some great research on different regions of the world and what people were looking for when it came to wellness travel or travel in general. And it just came out in the beginning of this year. It's free, you can download it on their website, but it was really interesting to see that people are really looking for these natural resources, as simple as hot springs or natural saunas or cultural experiences. That is what tourism is going to be now and in the future. There were tourism boards that were reaching out to me talking about, how do I market my our country has to offer that people don't know about in our natural resources. Hotels were like, how do we get our clients attracted and outdoors by our environment, what's around us, other than wellness is not just gyms and having a yoga session to offer your people. It's so much deeper and meaningful than that. And that is the kind of messaging and direction that I'm seeing a lot in the travel industry now.
That is great to hear. That's a much more holistic approach, and that's really good to hear because I do think a lot of times that people do think that wellness and health in general is just working out, running, and then like you said, the yoga mats. But there's just so much more, and so I'm curious. You were speaking of inspiring people and everything. So how did the Travel Coach Network? What was its origin story then?
Yeah, so when I started my travel coaching business and I started talking about it on Facebook, and like I said, I didn't Google this beforehand. So I started getting people reaching out to me, messaging and saying, "Hey, like what is that? That sounds interesting. It might be what I've been doing or what I want to do. Can you tell me more? Where'd you learn about this? Where'd you hear of this?" And I was thinking, I didn't hear about it anywhere, I had off in my head, and I said, let me go to Google and Google travel coaching. And there was like an article about 10 years prior, so they were way before their game when it came to, and it talked about the potential that travel coaching has. So that was 10 years prior. So right now that was about 14, 15 years ago that article was written. And then everything else that popped up were travel coach buses. And again, because I'm someone who does not fall into very like structure of what is expected or need proof or anything, that I said, okay, I'm going to create the first travel coaching network or group or community or something for travel coaches, because there wasn't anything. So as I was building my corporate travel coaching wellness business, I was also building at the same time the travel coach network. I built the travel coach network essentially for myself. I was looking for certain things. I wish I had a place to go to form a mentor, a coach to help me take my love and knowledge of travel and figure what the heck out I wanted to do with it. What could be possible? What can I create? What can I sell? Who can I talk to? Anything. I created that and I started just putting it into like a program, and it's eventually just transformed and then became my accredited travel coach certification program as it is now today. So I have a global network of travel coaches and experts all around the world in the travel coach network. So it's crazy.
Yeah, that is crazy. And I think it's good that you didn't go to Google initially, because I think a lot of times when we think of these inspiration, this light bulb goes off. We go to Google or something, and and that gives us all the reasons why somebody else is doing it or why I can't do it. You find all these reasons of why you can't do something instead of thinking
Right.
why you can't do something or like why not. So I think that's actually a big takeaway as I'm listening here, is to usually your intuition is onto something, and you just need to go with that and then figure it out as you go along.
Oftentimes people, like I said, people look for validation and ideas because let's face it, we don't like our time wasted and we want to know we can make money. So when people have an idea, they want someone else has done it, or if it's lucrative, instead of actually believing enough in their own idea and their own story and their own truth and a need or problem that they realized or learned about, and taking the time to create a solution for it. There's a big difference between entrepreneurs and those who do what's already been done before.
So I think I read somewhere that you talked a lot about mentorship and just how that helped you pave along the way. So I
Yeah.
guess in a few ways, like how has mentorship, like what's been the biggest takeaway from having like a coach or a mentor to guide you along the process?
Yeah. I have had various mentors, and I'm still close with many and most of them. I worked with my very first mentor, David Meltzer from Elevator Pitch. I started working with 3.5, 4 years ago. I forget how long ago I started my businesses, but at the very beginning, I was still hopping around the globe, Central America, South America. I was in Chile trying to find so I can have a call with my mentor for the first time. And I did not have clarity on what I was creating, what I was doing yet, what I even wanted to do yet. But I knew I could not figure that out on my own. There's a difference between being confident and finding answers and solutions and learning from those who have success or background or hardships that they've gone through and overcome, and learning from them. So I started working with mentors of various sorts throughout my business, mostly just by growing relationships, attending conventions, and reaching out afterwards after something they said in their speech resonated with me, or just whose messaging I related to online. Many of my mentors are not even in the travel industry. Obviously, none are in the travel coaching industry.
Yeah,
But when you're a business owner and you create things from scratch, there are so many different aspects that you have. Everything
absolutely.
from mindset and time and your schedule and negotiating and pitching and just everything. There's so many pieces. So yes, I include that into my travel coach. I run a smaller elite group of women entrepreneurs in travel. And I bring in some of these mentors that I work with and that I have learned so much from into them. and introduce the concept and the power of mentorship. And of course, I do mentorship for those in my network as well, because we just need support and community and people and role models that we can aspire and learn from, no matter what it is. It could be as simple as, having an imposter syndrome and asking someone who's been there before, how did you overcome this? What do you do? What do you recommend that I do? It's really, really important.
Yeah, entrepreneurship can be very lonely. It can be very lonely because you're doing something that you kind of block off great percentage of people because they're not going to really get what you're trying to
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
initially. So, especially I didn't come from an entrepreneurial background. So finding people was very critical for me because when I was talking to like friends, they didn't really know what the heck I'm doing. And
Yeah.
so, um,
My
so
friends
I
still
guess
don't know what I do.
yeah, that's a good question because I think somebody asked my mom the other day, like, "What does your son do?" And she's like,
Yeah.
"I don't know. He does a couple of things. I think I think he talks to people through the internet a lot." And so,
Exactly.
but I
That's
think
exactly what you
yeah,
do.
yeah, I think that's a lot of entrepreneurs when you like ask people close to know what they do. It's like I don't know. I think they talk to people, but then I see them do other things, so I don't really know. I think that's a compliment. I think.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I held the first meetup for my travel coach network. So some members who've been in it for a while, I did a get together in Chicago
Hmm.
last. And when they were telling me what they were telling, and they flew in from all different states,
Hmm.
and their families were asking them like, "Who is this? Who are you meeting? Do you know these people?" And like, "Well, we know them online. We've been talking. Yeah, I've done video chats with them." And they're like, "So you don't know these people?" And like all of them had a similar story. So it's
Yeah.
we're family, we're friends. It seems like we've known each other, but everyone's families are like, "Who? What do you do? Who are these
Yeah.
people?"
Yeah. I often say though, like like travel friendships, like the curve, and even I think a lot of times online as well, if you're in like these groups, the rate at which you grow closer is so much faster than
Yeah,
just like even like your neighbor. Because like
yeah,
I have friends who, I was in Portugal for maybe like 5 weeks, and we became so close during that time, and I just think it like cuts. I think you just get like right to the point, and you
yeah,
don't you don't you don't do this random small talk. So like, hey, how's the weather? Blah 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 blah. You get
right.
like you go right in, and so I think that's a
Yeah.
very beautiful thing about groups and even travel relationships.
Yeah, and that's the power of travel. Like people want to know like what brought you here, what got you to this location, and having these experiences together as well really bonds people because travel's a whole nother world. Even when I'm a traveler and I come back home, I'm like, who is that person? Who is that girl? How did she do
Hmm.
that? And then I get to the airport, I snap back into like this avatar of myself who's able to, travel the world to a lot of underdeveloped and developing countries on my own and love it. So people have commonalities, this similar bond through travel. And that's why growing a travel business, a travel related business has like I said, everyone in my network feels like family and friends that I've known for so long.
Hmm. Yeah. So what's the future hold for you?
Oh, it's going to be exciting. So, um, it really is. It's when you build something from a place of passion and authenticity and being genuine and having a community of people who value and you put out value, there only could be good things coming from that. But with the industry itself, there have been so many new opportunities and doors opening for my corporate side. I mean, even for my travel coach network side, they've been shaping in ways I never ever thought that they would. So the term goal that I see and have recently was a lot of interest from my corporate side into my travel coach network side and my travel coach network side into the relations with the corporate side.
Hmm.
So where I can connect both worlds with opportunities is something I that would happen. But even just from my corporate side, everyone in so many different industries just reaching out because of the concepts that I've been talking about. So designing programs and integrating platforms, ways for people to have these transformative, meaningful experiences that reach their specific goals of wellness activity that they didn't really think about before.
That's awesome to hear. So, as we get ready to kind of wrap this up a little bit, I'm going to ask just a few random questions.
Sure.
So, the first one is, what does success mean to you?
Being up and being happy to do what you do every single day.
And what are 2 to 3 books that have had a major impact on your life?
I would definitely say one of my mentor, David Meltzer, he has a book connected to goodness, which is fantastic. I've been reading a book recently on building your brand story. Building your brand story, especially as a traveler, can be really, really tricky. So it's just literally called Build Your Brand Story. And another one that really opened my eyes that I didn't know that this was even really a thing. And that's funny for me because that's what I get for travel coaching is like people are like, I didn't know that was a thing. But blue spaces, there's a book about blue spaces. And what that means is just body had its healing properties, which is something I always just knew, and there's research on it, but I didn't know that the term was blue spaces. So it's just healing toward like the benefits of being in or near ocean, seas, lakes, rivers. I'm an Aquarius, so I just thought it was like partially innate in me that to be drawn towards water, but it really has a lot of healing benefits. So reading that book has really opened my eyes too.
I think I read a book about this subject of the benefits of being around water. Is the guy's name Walter? I gotta see what the guy's name is now. I'm gonna look this up. Blue Spaces. I read this. No. Oh no, this is by Catherine Kelly, right? Yes. I read. And I'll have to tell you later. It's another book on water that I read, and I just happened to read it while on the plane ride over to Porto, and I was by the water a lot. So I'll have to tell you that when we get off air. But that's another good book. But I was very surprised as well, and because I'm not really like a water dude, but I did kind of notice that I'm a lot more calm. I'm not so high strung, and so seeing the water because I'm not really around any
Right.
water. So
I can relate.
but okay, so the next thing is let's say you got a bottle of wine or beer, coffee, tea, whatever your favorite beverage is, or you can have an option, or you can have all the options there. And it's a nice summer day outside. It's cool. It's not too hot. And you got 3 seats available to join you for a nice roundtable discussion. Throughout the course of history, would you invite to this roundtable discussion? And they could be dead or alive, but it has to exclude family.
And 3, usually it's 1 that you have to think of. I would definitely say Richard Branson with Virgin. I find his story and what he created in his brand so interesting. I would say this is I don't want to say, but actually Ashton Kutcher. And the reason being is because he's actually a very, very smart person. It's weird. I actually met him in person when I worked in Chicago. It was like the last table I served before I like quit my job. But he is just a very intellectual person about just, purpose in life and technology and innovation and stuff like that, which is something many people don't know about him. And the person would be probably Ariana Huffington, and she's the founder of the HuffPost and Thrive Global. And she's built a brand that is really impressive, and I've been following for a long time as well.
I like those, and I see why you chose them. So I asked 3 mainly because normally with 3, it gives a really good picture of the person's personality and what they value a lot. And so here, all these people, very adventurous, spirited, and purpose driven, And all three have also innovated specifically within their own industries and also innovated and reinvented themselves a handful of
Right.
times, which is something that you do.
Yeah, and there's a fourth chair, Gary Vanderchuck. He
Okay.
is really, I find his ideas really interesting. Despite his delivery, I find him and created and persevered is really fascinating to me.
So we'll add Gary Vee to the table. There's an extra seat in the back that we just brought up there.
Okay.
So,
Sounds good.
so, so this has been an interesting conversation to talk about, and especially, I don't think we think about. I think we think of travel just from a very superficial, surface level standpoint. But as you eloquently stated, that there's much deeper meanings and benefits to travel. So I really enjoyed this. Where can listeners keep up with more of what you're up to?
Yeah, so on various platforms, so whether it's Facebook or Instagram, you can always find me at the Travel Coach Network, or Sahara Rose The Travel Coach. And then I'm always on LinkedIn, Sahara Rose De Vore, to connect to. My websites are the Travel Coach Network or Sahara Rose Travels for the corporate one. But if you either use Sahara Rose De Vore or Travels and then the Travel Coach Network, you can probably find me somewhere.
Yeah, you're the first one that comes up. I just googled your name. You come up first. So you
No,
want to
it's
have a
actually
pop?
that's really interesting. There's actually another Sahara, there's a Sahara Rose. Well, of course, there's another Sahara Rose. I'm
Yeah.
not the only one in the world, but there's an, and she comes from the world of Ayurveda and more of like nutrition, and she's built her brand like massive over the years, and she's also a published author. I'm in the travel side of things and travel wellness, so I can see why people confuse us. Our names are the same, we're both January, and we have similar, actually really funny. For the past 4 years, people are like, hey, I just listened to your podcast. I'm like, I don't have a podcast. So
Interesting.
so it's
Yeah. Maybe my search engines knew, I guess, that I was going to talk to you. So I guess that's why yours came up on mine or something. Some, like, I don't know.
if it comes up.
Yeah.
I'm just saying there's another one out there, so many
Yeah.
people might confuse us.
But anyway, I will have all her information in the show notes. So thank you once again. And for the listeners out there, stay awesome, be limitless, and as always, go be superhuman. Peace.